everybody else would appreciate that too. But if you need to, go ahead, grab some food, drinks while we're talking. Obviously, that's okay. My name is Alex Leslie. I'm Senior Director of Educational Services at Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, and I'm really proud of the partnership that we have with Cleveland State University to offer programming like this. I'm really excited to get to share the stage with folks that I work with so often to address sexual violence. But I'd be remiss if I didn't, and she probably can't hear me out there, but if I didn't thank Catherine Teasling for all of her work to set up this room and get us the food and all of the other awesome things that she did to help us carry this program out. So thank you, Catherine. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks to so many folks. If folks in the room who submitted questions online in advance, we appreciate that. We had 14 of them, and we want to answer all of them. And then with some time left, we'll try to take questions from folks in the room. Vanessa, to my left here, will be helping with that, and go from there. So I will give everybody a chance to quickly introduce themselves, who they are, what their role is on campus or in the community, and then we'll get started. So we'll start with the chief.
So my name is Gary Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Campus Safety and Chief of Police here at Cleveland State University.
Hi, my name is Teresa Stafford. I'm the Senior Director of Victim Services and Outreach at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. I have members of my team that provide advocacy services to students here on the college campus.
I'm Rachel Lutner. I'm the Director of the CSU Office for Institutional Equity. That's the office on campus that deals with discrimination, harassment, and sexual violence. We provide training, we do a lot of problem solving, we provide resources and information to students, and we conduct investigations.
Hi, I'm Catherine O. I'm the Director of the Counseling Center in the Union Building. And I'm Emily Grady. I'm the Care Manager, so we provide crisis case management and support services to students, and I also oversee our LGBTQ+ student services.
All right, so as the mic makes its way back this direction, let's start with our first question to Chief and Teresa. This is a two-part question. What role does alcohol and/or other substances play in sexual assault cases at Cleveland State University? The second part is, and more generally, in our community, in our country. So I figured we'll start with the two of you.
So it has been my experience, especially when I'm working with populations, roughly about the age of 16 and 24, when those individuals kind of know their perpetrator, acquaintance rapes, what we sometimes call them, there's a lot of alcohol involved in that. A lot of times because of the age of 16 to 24, there's a lot of time when freedom takes place. Students may be entering a college campus for the first time and have a little bit more freedom, and alcohol can play a factor in that situation. How does alcohol play a factor? Sometimes an individual is not able to give consent during that time because of the amount of alcohol that they have digested, and an individual will take advantage of that person during that time period. We see that quite often under the Ohio Revised Code 2907. An individual who is intoxicated cannot give consent. They cannot legally give consent to have sexual conduct or sexual contact during that time period. And so we've seen alcohol continuously play a factor into individuals being sexually victimized. And when that happens, some of the survivors that I've engaged with who have willingly drank alcohol and were victimized, they tend to have a level of blame attached with it because they feel, had I not been drinking, this would not have happened to me. And I always have to encourage them that no matter what, it was not your fault. You are not to blame for your victimization. Drinking maybe should equal a hangover, a headache, but the outcome for drinking should never be that somebody was sexually victimized.
And to echo everything, and I absolutely agree, one of the other challenges for us in law enforcement is oftentimes the victim will not report these sexual assaults because there is a great fear that I'm underage, I had alcohol in my dorm, therefore they will go unreported. And so from the law enforcement perspective and the OIE perspective, it makes it challenging because there's a lot of self-guilt, as she mentioned, that is going on, that I should not have had the alcohol, it shouldn't have been in my room. And we want to always, always, always encourage students who see something, say something, and especially those who have been victimized by sexual assault to make sure to report it, regardless of those factors.
Yeah, Rachel, go ahead.
And just to echo Chief Lewis on that, at CSU, we do not pursue alcohol violations when students report sexual assault or any type of sexual violence. So our policy states that we will not pursue any alcohol-related conduct stuff when we're looking into sexual misconduct.
And it's also been my experience, just in case a student's off campus and they are sexually assaulted and alcohol was involved, law enforcement are going to look at the fact that you are a victim of a crime and not the fact that you were drinking underage.
Thank you all. And I know it's slightly old, but the statistics, as far as I remember, as many as 97% of campus-based sexual assaults involved alcohol, so very appropriate question to start us off with. Thank you. I'm going to direct this question to Teresa, and then perhaps Emily and Catherine, you can chime in here. But the question was asked, do you feel it's fair for people who've never experienced a rape to lead a discussion about it, since the person or individuals lack the understanding of what it means to endure this violation?
So this is what I feel. We don't know who has been a victim of sexual violence. There's not a badge or a button that we wear on our face or on our shirts that say, hey, I'm a victim. So with this panel, the panelists up here, we don't know who's a survivor. We don't know who's a survivor in this room. What we know is that 1 in 4 women, 1 in 33 men will be a victim of sexual violence sometime in their lifetime. So we never know who's speaking up in that moment about sexual violence. We also know that in order to combat this crime, we need allies. We need people to stand with survivors who may have never experienced this to say, hey, enough is enough. I want to help combat and eradicate this crime. So I think it's an opportunity that when anybody is using their voice in a positive way to end sexual violence, to continue the conversation, to bring awareness, that's a positive and not a negative. But we also, in the time when we are doing these things, we also have to center the voices of survivors in the work that we do. So when we are thinking about having these conversations, to engage with survivors, to make sure that we're doing it appropriately, and also to make sure that survivors' voices are always lifted up in the conversations. Because if we don't, then we are losing our way. We're getting off track of what we're doing, because this is all about survivors.
Yeah, so as someone who's a therapist and who supervises therapists, I know that sometimes that's a question people come in with, have you experienced sexual assault? But it's not necessarily helpful for you to know or not know if your therapist is a survivor, because everyone's experience is different. The way we might take it in, the way it might impact us is going to be different based on the person and the situation. So one of the things I think about is, what do you need right now? Do you need peer support from other folks who have survived? Or are you looking for legal support or professional support from police or professional support from a therapist? So I think there are lots of ways that survivors can be uplifted and empowered. Sometimes a survivor may feel like what I really need to hear is the voices of other people who've experienced what I have. And I want to honor that, and there are really good venues for that. Other times it can be helpful to have other folks involved. So I think that we can be helpful to each other, whether we've survived it or not, whether we've had the experience or not. But if someone's feeling like they most just need to hear from others who've experienced it, I think honoring that is really helpful too.
There's not much to add, but just to reiterate the idea that just because maybe you haven't personally experienced something doesn't mean that you can't support a friend or someone that you know who has experienced that. And there are lots of resources offered by all of these offices represented here, not just for survivors, but also for people who are supporting survivors. If you need assistance in figuring out how to approach situations or what resources to best offer that person, that we can also help with that too.
I'm going to have you keep the mic, Emily. Sure. I know you were trying to pass it back this way, but I want you to answer this question because I feel like your office represents some of what's asked in this question. So what best practices at CSU have been mirrored by other institutions, and what support systems has CSU implemented that mirror here at universities?
Sure, so I can speak from our Office of Care Management, that perspective. So a lot of the work that we do is based on this higher education model of case management, where our goal is to triage students and help connect them with the best, most appropriate resources right away. So there's a whole group of higher education education case managers at the different universities who consult with one another to make sure that we're kind of developing best practices as we go along, because it's a newer field. So we're making sure that we're working to, particularly in this field, connect individuals not only with our Office for Institutional Equity when there is a report made to get them accommodations or support through that office, but also we are lucky to have CRCC right next door, so we're immediately able to triage. So I think that that is one of the things that we're doing, is making sure that survivors, when they come to us, are getting connected with support resources immediately and not kind of being sent to 12 different places, that we're able to be that center point that can connect a survivor with all the different offices and then follow up with them and kind of offer a checklist of here's the different places you can go, here's the different resources you can go to kind of streamline that process for them.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Just real quickly, another best practice is to have some offices on campus that are confidential, because most staff at CSU are mandated to report. When you come to the counseling center, you're not. If you go to CRCC, they're not. So having a few places where you can have a confidential person to speak with, where it's not going to then go on to a further process, is a best practice we have here.
And I'll just emphasize what she means by confidentiality. So when you engage with the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center for services, we do not have to report back to the school that you're engaging with us on services. You can actually come in and you can have complete privacy with regards to the services that you're seeking at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center.
Thank you all. There are two questions that kind of in a similar vein, so I'm going to kind of combine them, but and they're about reporting and who, whether somebody is by law required to report if they find out that somebody has experienced a sexual assault, and follow up to it, as well as how do we make people aware of who has, who's mandated to report, who's confidential, as Teresa and Emily alluded to, and Catherine as well. How do we both educate about what's mandated, and is somebody mandated by law to report that? What is that? What's that all about?
So one of the things that the Office for Institutional Equity does is we work really, really hard to educate the campus about who's a confidential resource and who are responsible employees. So at CSU, almost all CSU employees, with very few exception, are responsible employees, which means if you tell a responsible employee that you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence, then that person has an obligation to tell the Office for Institutional Equity. We have confidential resources on campus, which are Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, the Counseling Center, also the ministry at Trinity Lutheran Church, and the doctors and nurses doing patient care and health and wellness. OIE does, we do a lot of training. New students take the online sexual violence prevention course, and that goes through who the confidential versus responsible employee resources on campus are. OIE tries to train every year all of the faculty in all of the academic departments and all of the student-facing areas of campus, so that when students come and want to talk to them and possibly disclose something to them, that those CSU employees, either faculty or staff, have the ability to say, hey, I'm a responsible employee, and if you want to talk to a confidential resource, let me get you to one of those people. That information is also available on the OIE website, and we always tell everyone that you can always call OIE and say, hey, I want to talk to a confidential resource, and we won't ask you any questions, we'll just get you hooked up with somebody who's confidential.
And you might be thinking, hey, well, why would somebody want to talk to somebody confidential versus somebody who's responsible? So one of the reasons is somebody who's responsible, they have certain steps that they must take once they get this information. They may have to make an additional report, do an investigation, and then that survivor will have to engage at a higher rate. When you talk to a confidential person, you don't have to do that. You can go there for information so you can understand the steps that you might have to engage in once you talk to that responsible person. And also you'll get connected to a victim advocate that can walk you through the process and be with you every step of the way if you decide to make that step to go and talk to the responsible person. They will also talk to you about the other options that you have if you want to make a police report directly with the police department. So it's just not just telling you where you can get services, but it's also giving you all the options that's available to you.
Anything else to add?
So one of the questions posed in the two-part was, how do we get the word out? How do we manage to ensure that 17,000 students know about these types of services. And I think even this in itself is a proactive outreach. It's an opportunity to share the resources that we look at internally from the OIE perspective, and then oftentimes with my department, the police department, when it becomes an external criminal matter. We try to make sure that we provide information on web pages. There are tons of brochures. This amazing partnership with the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. We really try to make sure that individuals not only know what resources are available, but we also make sure that our responsible employees know that they are what's called CSAs and that they're bound by law to report those types of incidents to both the OIE and to the police department.
Thank you all. This is a fairly quick one, and maybe Catherine or Emily, you can address this. Has the university been granted more resources to assist in the counseling of those impacted by sexual assault?
Yeah, thanks for that question. One of the things I looked at before I came over today was the number of students that we have coming into the counseling center each year who are reporting that they are a victim of sexual violence. I noticed that over the last 3 years it's increased. So 3 years ago, we had about 13% of our clients had reported sexual violence when they came in for counseling, then 18%, and then 20% last year. So it has been going up. We haven't had more resources specifically for that at the counseling center, but what we have done the last couple of years is partner with CRCC so that they have an office here on campus and are working particularly with victims of sexual violence. And then recently, Circle Health, which is a community agency, used to be called the Free Clinic, they received a big grant from the federal government to do free trauma therapy for folks. So when you come into the counseling center, if you've worked with us for a while, but you want to get more counseling elsewhere, we have great places to partner with to get you more help.
So the context for this event was really about the Me Too movement and how that sort of social media connection to people sharing their story and how often these stories have gone untold. And I know, for example, for many of us who do this work, we were not surprised by how many of our folks that we know in our own circles have been impacted by sexual violence, but many people were. And it has not, as it started this fall, it has not really lost its steam as much as many movements have. A lot of the, what Chief alluded to, sort of the required by law to report, that came about due to the Penn State sexual abuse scandal and the desire for campus to know what's happening on campus. Some of those things, have lost some steam over time, but this is one that doesn't seem to be. The next question that came in, it feels like sort of an inevitable reaction from somebody who maybe is having a harder time understanding how often this does happen. And the question really is about false accusations as well. So how often do false accusations of rape or sexual assault occur? I think if somebody reasonably looks at how many folks in their circle are saying this impacts them, if you've not known that this was so common, it can be somewhat natural to say, oh, is this all true? How often is it false? Is somebody falsely accused, and is there any research or data that supports that that there's a typology or who is doing this more often? Maybe Teresa, you want to start?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. I'm not sure if there's any research out here that says that this type of person or individual may make a false report more than another individual. What I know, there is some research out here that says that false reports occur about 2% of the time, and that's the same rate as any other false report for any other crime in our society. My experience is that survivors are not coming forward and saying they're not telling the truth, that they're making this story up, that what happened to them didn't happen. What we tend to see where people say stuff is false report and the person is not being honest is that there may be a piece or part of what they're disclosing that may not be true because they're trying to save face. Or if they're being asked to disclose too soon after they were victimized, what they say because of the trauma that they may have experienced Their story may be convoluted, it may be all over the place, it may not come out in a linear fashion. So for that individual that doesn't understand the neurobiology of the brain, they may take it as if this person isn't being truthful. The other thing I would say is, when I have worked with young ladies, sometimes they may say, no, I wasn't drinking, and we find out that they were drinking. And so because they weren't honest about that little piece, because they was afraid that there might be some punishment connected to it, then they're lying about everything, is what officers have said in the past. So it's been, like I said, my experience is that survivors often are telling the truth. We need to work from a standpoint where we believe people and give them the support that they need. There's a big push in law enforcement across the country that started down south, and it's called Start by Believing. And there's training law enforcement officers that when a survivor sits in front of you and say that they have been sexually assaulted, you believe first and let your investigation take you wherever it goes. But you start by believing. The number one reason why survivors say that they don't come forward, because they have a fear of not being believed. And until we change that in our culture, then we're going to have less survivors coming forward.
And as OIE, we investigate allegations of sexual violence on campus, and I would say when we have somebody sitting in front of us saying that what she's telling you or what he's telling you that didn't happen, you know, it's simply that people have different perspectives sometimes, but when we're talking to somebody who says, I was assaulted, this happened to me, people are absolutely telling us what they happened from how they perceived it. And when their partner later is like, well, that's not true, it was consensual, it's that there was really bad communication and somebody saying, somebody thought they had consent when in fact they didn't.
I'll just add to it, since you brought it in connected to the Me Too movement, the Harvey Weinstein situation. We know that survivors, depending on who you are as a survivor, there may be a different response in society, how the society responds to the survivor, and then it goes to, oh, she was lying. For instance, with Harvey Weinstein, he did not make a public comment about none of the survivors until the survivor of color came forward, Lupita. Lupita was the survivor that he said, no, that didn't happen. So it's more of a response from people and a response from systems and a response from perpetrators, depending on who that victim is, that get people to start thinking, hey, that person is lying and not being honest. And that's a narrative that we have to change so we can have more and more survivors from marginalized populations, not only coming forward to disclose to law enforcement, but coming forward so they can access services.
I guess I want to pull that thread a little longer. I'm jumping to a little later question, Teresa, because I feel like you're touching on this, but the question came in as, has the Me Too movement been representational of all individuals who have experienced instances of sexual harassment, abuse, and assault?
Well, I had the pleasure last night to be in an audience with Taryn Burke at Youngstown State University, who was actually the creator of the Me Too movement. And she talked about that question because that was asked. And one of the things that she said is that, you know, it's not surprising to her that the most marginalized people, the black and brown people that this movement was created for, is not making it to mainstream media. That's not a surprise, but she encouraged people in the audience to still tell the narrative, keep pushing forward, because it has to be on us and on our allies to make sure that all voices are lifted in this conversation. We can't leave out our LGBTQ community. We can't leave out survivors that are immigrants. We can't leave out survivors who are in poverty. We can't leave out the college students. We have to make sure that as a community that we are making sure all survivors are centered in this movement. Because when we do that and we have media in the narrative, you're going to have that survivor at home that's saying, hey, they're not talking about me. They're not talking about me. Then maybe what happened to me wasn't really what happened. And that gets that person to rethink and start victim blaming and be ashamed of what happened and never may possibly seek services. So I think it's important for all of us who are in this movement, and for those of you who want to be allies, to really make sure that the conversation continues and that we're talking about the most marginalized people, because we know that Native American women are sexually assaulted at a higher rate than any other female in our country. We also know that for every one African American that reports, 15 don't. We know that Asian women are sexually assaulted at a high rate. We know that trans women of color, their victimization is ridiculous. So I think we have to be the ones that continuously having these conversations and making sure when we're talking about the Me Too movement, that we're talking about everybody.
Anyone have anything to add to that? Okay, maybe I'll have the mic make its way down to Emily, because I do have Teresa touched on this, but another question kind of came in, is does support look different for men, women, gender non-conforming folks within the Me Too movement? And I feel like there's adding more to that, looking at our full acronym of folks, LGBTQIA folks, does support look different for those folks as well as, men versus women, etc.?
Absolutely, and I think you touched on a couple important points, Teresa, that we, through data, know that about 47% of trans individuals are sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime, and rates for queer, I'll use the blanket term, individuals of sexual assault are generally higher than rates for people in heterosexual communities. So you look at that information, those people aren't always coming forward, as you mentioned. I think one of the major blocks for people coming forward and receiving support within LGBTQ plus communities, there's a lot of stigma, number one, around the idea that not just women experience sexual assault. It's an issue that everyone experiences, and also intimate partner violence. And also, there's a lot of factors. So if you consider, if I come forward and say that I was assaulted or there's intimate partner violence happening, I have to out myself to the police or to my university. So there's an issue. I might be faced with, well, you're a man, that can't happen to you. How can that happen? So I think that there's a lot of factors that prevent these people from reporting, whether they're men, whether they're members of LGBTQ plus communities. And this is a dynamic or conversation that involves everyone. So support looks different for everyone. I think Catherine mentioned earlier that it's a kind of a case-by-case basis, how people respond to trauma, what needs people have. So one of the goals that we have here when we provide services is to look at the unique identities that an individual holds and to try to connect them with support resources to meet those individual needs. Because it is an issue that impacts everyone and statistically does impact our LGBTQ plus communities at a greater rate.
I would want to, maybe, Catherine, I know you're going for Mike, and there's a question I feel like is a natural, not conclusion, but a continuation of where Emily was there. We're sticking with this theme of Me Too. We had several questions about that. And somebody asked, are there support groups offered for students who have been raped to be able to find comfort in hearing Me Too? And this person disclosed that it would have been helpful when this first came out to know more about the resources. So.
Yeah, that is a great question. I want to address a little bit around support looking different for different groups as well. I know in my work doing therapy with trauma survivors, one of the things that can happen is someone can be assaulted by a person in their own community. So a Latina person who's in a close community of other Latina and Latino people at their college might be assaulted by someone they look to as a mentor who has a good reputation within their community and can split the community. They can lose friendships and support that they otherwise would have gone to for support when something like this happened. The same thing can happen in any close-knit community, but particularly around ethnicity, identity, LGBT identities, that can create more of a traumatizing experience because you don't have as many resources to recover from it. So that's something that we really look at when we're trying to provide support and help someone recover is what supports they do have and what losses they're experiencing as people react to what happened. In terms of support groups, at the counseling center, we primarily do individual counseling. We do have a number of different groups, but not one focused particularly on sexual assault survivors. One of the groups I do is called Wise Minds, and it's a general sort of coping strategies group that helps us cope with extreme feelings, which can definitely be a natural effect of trauma. A lot of people who attend that group have had some trauma experiences. But in terms of groups that are particular to sexual assault, we really refer a lot to CRCC for that. They've got a number of different groups available for that, and those are sort of always going. And so that allows us to let people connect there for group. They could stay with us for individual therapy or use CRCC for individual therapy services as well.
Just the couple groups that we have a Trauma 101 group, and that's the introduction group, just giving people some basic skills so they can cope with the trauma that they have experienced. And we also have a women's group, we have a male group, and we also have a trauma yoga group that runs.
So, while you have the microphone, Teresa, I feel like I can direct this question to you and maybe also to Rachel and Chief here. What impact, if any, have we seen Me Too or Time's Up movements have on disclosures, reports? I happen to know the answer for us, but Teresa, if you can share a little bit about us at CRCC, and then we can talk about on campus as well. Has this led to an increase in reports, increase of accessing services?
We have always been busy, but we have been extremely busy since October. Our hotline increased calls, I think about 40%. Intake one week had 30 intakes that came in. We had parents calling and say, hey, I saw on my child's social media the Me Too hashtag. What does this mean? How can I help my child? We had a lot of phone calls from the hotline. My friend has this, how can I support? So what we've seen is definitely an increase in individuals accessing our counseling services. Our text and chat hotline, if you don't know, our main hotline number, which is on the little pamphlets you have in your seat, its ability to text and chat. That hotline increased tremendously during that time period, and it's consistently going up with the number of calls and texts that are coming through. Definitely counseling. We have also seen that some of the people that were in counseling have now said, hey, I might be ready to make that police report now. I see that I'm not alone. So we have seen an increase with regards to people coming in and wanting to have information about all of their options with regards to reporting. The other thing that we have seen that has increased tremendously on our team that provide victim services is people now know that they don't have to only get justice through the criminal justice system, that they are going after civil sanctions and saying, hey, if it was an entity such as maybe they were sexually assaulted at work or at a facility, wherever, that somebody else can be held responsible, and maybe also the individual that assaulted them. It's just another way that survivors have an option to get justice.
Yeah,
So, and I would echo that for OIE and this campus. I think that the Me Too movement has created greater awareness about what type of conduct people have a right not to have to deal with. And so I think we're both seeing more students coming in to report things like unhealthy relationships and stalking. They're a lot quicker to say, you know what, this makes me really uncomfortable, and it's not stopping. And I think we're also seeing more of people's friends contacting us and saying, you know, my friend's talking about this. And the same with CSU faculty and staff. I think they're becoming quicker to say, you know, the student told me this, and, you know, I think this is an issue for your office. I think it's really helped raise awareness.
Yeah, anybody else? Yeah.
So, is it okay if I take you guys on a short journey with me? All right, so this past weekend I was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is also home of Lehigh University. And a young lady by the name of Jean Cleary lost her life after being sexually assaulted on that campus. That changed the landscape of the responsibilities that we as leaders, administrators, and law enforcement do what we do on a day-to-day basis. Each year we're required to provide our campus community with statistics that not only provide a historical look at what's taking place, but it also forces us to make sure that if a serious incident occurs on our campus, that we send an alert notifying that campus community of what took place. So I share that background to build you to this point. Last year when we looked at the data and we saw the number of sexual assaults had increased. When you see that, the first thing the media said, Chief, the numbers are almost doubled in comparison to the previous year. What went wrong? And my response is, everything's going right. The reporter says, what do you mean? I said, you know, when I'm here on a Saturday, or I get a phone call on Sunday morning at 2 in the morning, and my sergeant says, Chief, just had a young lady, she and her roommate just came into the police department, and she is telling us that she's been sexually assaulted. The strength for that young lady to come in, to report, to have the confidence to do that, and to see that happening more and more on our campus and across our country tells me that we're doing things right. We definitely have room to improve, continuing to send that message, but every time that happens and I see these young women come in and they have the strength to do that and they have those support groups around them, that they have the ability to walk into a police department in the middle of the night and to say this happened to me. I mean, think about that. So to me, that is a huge step in making sure that we're providing the resources, that we're giving them the confidence that we will do a complete thorough investigation, that we make sure that the experts that are in our Cleveland Rape Crisis Center and many of the folks that you see sitting up here on the stage are giving those survivors all the things that they need to work through a very traumatic incident.
Thank you all for that. We have just a couple more pre-asked, questions that came to us before this event. I would like to leave enough time for everybody, not everybody, but folks who wanted to ask a question live here in the room, time to do that. So I'll try to keep these last few brief, both in terms of asking and encourage you all to do the same in terms of answers. But a question came to us about traditionally masculine groups, such as fraternities and athletics, have been highlighted as concerning populations when it comes to sexual violence. What happens within a group such as this if a member or multiple members are identified as perpetrators here at CSU? Rachel, perhaps you want to start with this one, or maybe we'll just have you answer this one.
So I think when we hear about on the news, like some traditionally masculine groups, like certain type of sports teams at some universities or fraternities, usually I think we're hearing about it because those things are really egregious and the schools often aren't handling them very well. I don't think it's likely that we would ever see that here at CSU. OIE works very, very closely with athletics, and when we have had issues around athletics, I would say both the faculty and the staff and all of the students, the perception of any sort of sexual misconduct is immediate, horror and wanting to work within the university system to address whatever happened and full cooperation. And the same is true with with our Greek organizations when the issues come up.
Yeah, as a man who's been doing this work for a dozen years or so, I think part of our role at CRCC is also to help those groups see the value in their partnership, because the vast majority of men don't commit sexual assault, but we've let say 2 out of 10 set the tone for how we talk about that. So I think it's in the interest of every group to think about their role in preventing sexual violence as an aspiring ally, as an active bystander, as someone who's talking about this and letting people know what their values are.
Right. And here at CSU, our athletics and our Greek organizations have all learned about bystander intervention and our standards and our policies and how to report, and those groups do report.
I have 2 quick last questions. Rachel, maybe you can answer this one the best. Being a campus with multiple community college relationships, I'll say Rachel, maybe you and Teresa, with multiple community college relationships, is Cleveland State helping to initiate and develop similar support on campuses? So basically, if somebody's working with, say, Tri-C or Lorraine Community College, are those schools getting the resources they need for students before they get here?
So OIE does touch base with our community college partners, like the Title IX coordinators at other places, to see what are you doing, and what's working for you, and here's what's working for us at CSU. And also we do attend, along with our community college partners, seminars and training put on by the Ohio Department of Higher Education on best practices in sexual assault or sexual violence prevention and response. So we are all working together on these issues.
And this county has a team that I head up called the Cuyahoga County Sexual Assault Response Team. And what is really exciting for us, and which is different from a lot of other communities, we have campus representation for just about every major college campus in Cuyahoga County sitting at the table attending those meetings. Cleveland State is a big partner of ours. And what has happened is that group is allowed to meet, and they can share best practices across the group. They can share their hiccups, so the other ones won't have that hiccup and make the same mistake. And then we also can think about how can we really work together as a community, as a whole, not just in silos, and how we can respond to survivors in a trauma-informed manner.
This last one, maybe I'll address to Emily. So the question came in basically, how do we help people understand what resources are available? We've heard a lot from folks about, our resources at CRCC, all the campus resources. How do we get the word out about what's available?
Sure. So one of the things that our office, our care management team strives to do is to kind of be that place you can go as your starting point. So when you have no idea where to start, you just have a bunch of questions. Our goal is to just connect you with all of those resources. One of the things I think all of us here strive to be is trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive. So when we're giving you that information, whether you've experienced something, you have a friend who's experienced something, our goal is to give you options and understand that, you know, there's different options that are best for some people. Some people might want to go to the police report, some people might want to go to CRCC. So if you or someone you know has been struggling with this, you can always come through our office, understanding we are a mandated reporter, but you only have to share with us so much information as you want. I have plenty of people who come through and indicate that something has happened. They don't share specific information, so we talk about what are the benefits of connecting with OIE, what are the benefits of connecting with CRCC, and oftentimes we can help you make a call to make an appointment when you're in our office, so that's something that you would want some support with. So our goal is always to kind of be that direct place. And also CRCC is always available. We call, the advocate that we work with, Chelsea, is amazing, and then having Vanessa and Tessa on campus as well, we always consult with them, so we're happy to put students or faculty or staff in touch with CRCC for additional support as well.
Tracy, you have something to add?
Yeah, the other thing I want students to recognize is that you do not have to seek our services only if you were assaulted on college campus. We know that students will present at school who have been sexually assaulted in their childhood. Maybe they just get into a safe place. They have never been able to unpack that and want to start talking to somebody. And we know that sometimes that, dealing with that can actually interfere with your education, interfere with your ability to engage on campus and fully. So you can also come seek our services for previous sexual assault that took place before you entered the college campus.
And I would say that's exactly OIE's approach as well. If you come to OIE because you were sexually assaulted as 3 years ago before you even were admitted to CSU or even thought about coming here, we are still going to do everything we can to help you overcome the barriers that experience is placing before you. So whether you're still suffering from trauma or whether something you're studying in class is triggering you, we're going to work with you to help you overcome those barriers, to help you get back on track academically, to get you the right resources so that you can deal with it. We are absolutely not limited to sexual assault or sexual violence that happens to you while you're a student here. It can be on campus, off campus. What we care about is whether or not it's impacting you right now.
Thank you all for sharing. And as a partner of Cleveland State, I feel it's necessary to explain that not every college student across the country has access to the resources that you've heard about up here on the table. And while everybody up here would admit and know that there's always a longer way to go in terms of serving and meeting the full needs of every student who has experienced sexual violence, that I am pleased as a campus partner to see the lengths to which CSU does go to serve the needs of survivors. And I can't speak for all survivors, and I wouldn't dare to, but I have been impressed with the work of all the individuals up here on the dais with me. So with the time, we've got about 10 minutes left. I've got our manager of campus services, Vanessa Samsels, over there. She supervises the folks that Emily alluded to earlier. If anybody in the room has any questions to ask of the panel, you can direct your question at somebody individually or at me, and I can have an idea of who I may suggest to answer that question. But please, it's open. Looks like you have one.
Thank you. How do the resources at CSU work with the community, whether that's non-students or families in the community, to provide the same services for them as well?
So at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, we offer all of the services basically that you have on campus to the entire community. We have a full counseling team of about maybe 6 or 7 counselors, or maybe even more than that. I think it's about 10, 11 counselors that are able to provide services out in the community. We actually have a geographical expansion of 4 counties: Lake, Geauga, Ashtabula, and Cuyahoga County. And for little kids, we're actually able to go into the homes or into the schools and provide counseling. We have a team that's about 10 people that actually help support survivors as they navigate the systems. Our hotline, our prevention team that Alex actually supervises, where they're going into the schools, into communities, because in order to really eradicate this, we know it starts with conversations at an early age, talking about healthy relationships, bullying, and understanding that what consent means. So we're all over.
Emily may have something to add there too.
You know, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that the goal of our care management office is to also support individuals who are supporting survivors. So I know I've had lots of people come through my office who have a parent, who have a family member, who have a partner, who has experienced some sort of intimate partner violence, is in a relationship that they see as maybe not being the healthiest or has experienced sexual assault, and to give the resources to that person to help them then guide the person who maybe isn't a CSU student to connect with resources. So we also will refer to resources in other counties if it's outside of Cuyahoga County. That's one of the goals that we have, though, is I know it can be really overwhelming to support someone who's going through that. So our goal is always to help arm you with the resources to then help that person.
And I would just quickly say, I know there's another question coming here in a second. There's some folks already in the room who have other services that are provided on campus. I see Jillian over here with Lift Up Bikes, and that is more than just, you know, Women's Center. There's resources including food for students who need that. And I see Claire from CASC, former colleague. And I think that, you know, that's academic support. I know I'm being very quick with my descriptions of both of your programs, but know that there's a constellation of stuff available for folks on campus. You know, we're being specific about the resources about sexual violence, but we know that sexual violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, Teresa made some great comments about the most marginalized folks. We know sometimes folks have to take care of their basic needs before they can deal with the trauma.
And I just wanted to add, even for, because some students are not from Cleveland, they're not from Cuyahoga County, not from this community. So we also have what we call Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. That's our state coalition. So what we do is literally call them and say, hey, we're working with this individual. They're on their way home for summer break, and they live in Cincinnati. What's the resource in Cincinnati? We call that partner an agency and do a warm handoff so they can have some continuity and services during that time period. And if they're out of the state of Ohio, we'll reach out to another rape crisis center program or whatever services that are in the community in which they reside.
Yeah, and just to emphasize all of that, so for OIE, sometimes we have students who come to us and say, you know, I'm living at home and my mother's involved in a really unhealthy relationship, and there's a lot of there's sexual violence in my home. So we absolutely will do everything we can to assist that student, because that student in our office is being affected by sexual violence right now, even if that student is not the direct victim of it.
I see there's a question in the audience, please.
How do you suggest going about, like, say you have a male friend that was sexually assaulted, how do you get him to build up the courage to go up? Because I know there's like a negative, kind of like, you're too man enough, why would you like go? Like, I know men that don't.
Yeah, that's a really tough question. You know, I think every survivor has their own time when they're ready to get help. And there's a balancing act between expressing your concern and really allowing their autonomy. So one of the things I think we have to do when we care about someone who's suffering is try to tolerate our own discomfort, to honor what they most need and what they want to do, even though it might be really hard to watch. And then if you notice how it's affecting them, you might say, hey, it looks like, you know, you're drinking more than usual, or you're not sleeping well, I'm worried about you. Of course, you could offer to go with them to seek resources, but if they ultimately say no, you know, one of the things about trauma is that something happened to you that you didn't choose. So what we can do as we support a survivor is to allow them to choose, even if it's hard for us to watch.
And just to add, it takes our clients at CRCC an average of 10 years between when they were assaulted and when they come to us. So one of the hardest parts, as Catherine kind of alluded to, is being comfortable with empowering that person with whatever they decide to do. We can kind of address that when they do concerning behaviors or that we're worried about, but to force somebody to do something or try to compel somebody to do something is a little too much like what happened to them before. So, you know, we talk a lot about this, whether you're helping somebody who is coping with a sexual assault or somebody who's in an abusive relationship, we often talk about leave the door open. You don't want to, you know, shut it and say, if you don't get help, then you can't come talk to me anymore. To assure that they're not going to get help, right? Those kind of ultimatums don't work in situations like this. You want to leave that door open as much as possible. So, as difficult as it would be.
And I would also just add to that, validate their feelings.
Yeah.
Validate that what they're feeling is real, and then believe them, and give them a resource that they may utilize it one day. They may not utilize it that day, but when they're ready, they may utilize it.
Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions in here?
And we also have a male support group if they're ever ready.
Just one more thing to that. A lot of us have friends who are doing things that we wish they would do it differently or wish they'd get help. And if it's wearing you out, come get help yourself, because the longer you can hang in there and leave the door open and be their friend, the better off they'll be. But you have to take care of yourself too. So don't wait until you've burned out the friendship to come get support for yourself.
Question? Yeah. Okay. Is there any question in the room still? Please.
So you said there was like a 10-year gap between when people come forward. So I was wondering, so if they waited so long, what about like the physical evidence of that assault? Like how do they address that with, like when they go to the police? Like how do they handle that?
So I would say that most of the time when individuals come forward and they have a forensic medical exam complete, there's no evidence. Majority of the time there isn't any evidence because the body has a way of protecting itself during traumatic situations. And if protection was used, there might not be any DNA. But what a good investigator is going to do, they're going to listen. They're going to ask the right questions, and then they're going to complete an investigation and find out how much information they can that can collaborate the situation. Majority of the cases are late disclosures that prosecutors and investigators are dealing with. A lot of times people don't go forward right away for various reasons. But Alex was actually referring to that when people seek counseling services, there's a huge delay with that. That a lot of times they go through the stages of trauma, and then they get to a point where they're saying, hey, you know what? I can't keep living like this. There has to be a better way. They're recognizing how their victimization is impacting their ability to be the greatest that they can be, and that's when they seek counseling. Through outreach, through having a campus relationship, through doing an outreach that we do at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center and education, we're hoping that that 10 years continue decreases, that more and more people are able to access us right away, and that we continue to get funding and resources to actually be able to meet the needs of those survivors present.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Teresa. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions in the room? One back there, please.
So the narrative seems to be once people come forward, working with them, helping them, talking with them. One thing that I heard that sounded uncommon was sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. And when is that necessary, or when is that the case?
I think that goes to the choice of that individual, where an individual needs to make the best decision that they feel is for themselves to come forward when they're ready. Because if we force people to disclose, we could be re-victimizing them. I've worked numerous cases where survivors initially made a police report, and then for whatever reason, they had to step back because it wasn't in their best interest, whether it was mentally or physically, for them to go forward. And when they were forced to go forward, the end result was horrible for that survivor. And so I think we have to give people choices, especially adults. Our children, we need to make sure they're safe. We need to give our adult survivors a choice and also make sure they're safe, but how they decide to engage. And they choose not to, we have to respect it. We really have to respect it because we could do more damage than good.
So one of my go-to mantras is always that trauma is a completely normal response to a situation that's not normal, right?